Okay, why don't we get started? Welcome once again. Good morning, Andy. This session will be focused on conserving cash in tough times. I know you have an action-packed hour for us, so why don't we get started?
Sure, but before we do, Scott, how about we just do a quick round of introductions here? I'll start by introducing you. So my good friend, Scott McIntosh, Scott's spent over 24 years working with companies, improving their results by way of adding technology. Most recently, he was a partner at Deloitte Consulting, focusing on digital solutions. And that happened after they acquired his company, Swift Radius, in 2015 here, not too long ago. Scott has recently launched his newest company, which is Second Spring Digital, to help companies with their rapid adoption of digital solutions. So I wanted to make that introduction. Scott and I will be working on these webinars, and I'm excited about this.
Thank you, Andy, and let me return the favor. So, my friend Andy Biting. Andy's a lifelong entrepreneur. Been in business since age 17. After scaling his own company, Andy became a certified scaling up coach, which is just a tremendous program built by Vern Harnish. And that's one of the ways Andy and I got to know each other originally, just my interest and the high regard I have for that program. So Andy's been coaching companies across North America for the past decade, leveraging those tools, and centers around strategy, execution, people, and cash, which of course is the topic today. Andy's also a partner in Tulip Media Group. That's a digital and print marketing agency, and they provide a very unique combination of SEO and content marketing services for companies across North America. So Andy, thanks again for your time today. Over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. So today we are talking about cash. As Scott mentioned, cash is king. And in these difficult times, this is most important, and it's probably the first knee-jerk reaction that most of us have in business when we have a crisis is, what do we do with cash? What do we do with conserving our cash? Now, I'm going to go through a program that I've prepared, but I also know that, both Scott and I, preparing for today, we talked about our own trials and tribulations. Myself, for those of you who don't know me, I actually, scaled a couple of different businesses, but about 10 years ago, I actually went through some really hard times. Of course, then it wasn't COVID-19, it was the recession, but it actually caused our business. I actually lost everything. And so cash is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And I know my own experience. I went from, I used to be risk-taking when it came to cash in business to a little more conservative approach. And I know it served me well. And I know, Scott, you have similar experiences, don't you?
I do, and I've been reflecting on that as well as we prepared for this session. And I started our first consulting business back in 2004, and I was really a self-taught entrepreneur. I didn't have a lot of mentorship, and certainly didn't have a lot of mentorship on cash. And we were fortunate enough to grow that business rapidly. But I noticed as the payroll got to 3 million and headed to 4 million, that there was a lot of complexity that emerged, and I think a lot of it centered on cash. Just a couple quick examples of some of the challenges we have. I mean, we had a regional office that we opened that we subsequently needed to close within 2 years. It was very painful. And we launched a venture-backed startup, an excellent team of 8, which again, after 2+ years, we needed to close. And really there's expensive lessons in there tied to cash. And so, I wish I had the tools that you'll be showing us here today, Andy. I wish I had been applying them, and I certainly am in my current businesses and anything go forward. And cash is king is certainly a lesson learned for me in my business journeys to date. So very wonderful topic.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll start moving on to the material. And by the way, everyone, Scott and I will be going back and forth if there's. But if you do have questions, there is mechanisms to, through Zoom webinar, you can raise your hand. We'll answer questions as we go through if we can. Scott's going to keep an eye on that, or we'll leave lots of time at the end. One thing we did mention, we're 6 minutes past now. We are going to watch the time very, very closely, and we promised a 1 hour webinar, and we won't go over. If we finish up a little bit early, great, but we promise you it'll be an hour worth spent, and we will not go over. So I'm going to get started here, and I'm going to start, as we mentioned, the cash module is a key component to the scaling up methodology that Scott briefly mentioned. The scaling up, Vern Hardish wrote a book in the late 90s called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. That eventually turned into scaling up in the early, about 5-6 years ago maybe. But the whole methodology is centered around 4 key decisions that every company must get right in order to scale successfully and be successful. And they are their people, strategy, execution, and of course, cash decisions. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is your cash decisions. There's 5 tactical strategies that I want to share with you. Not all of them are from scaling up, but a portion of them are. They're certainly all influenced from scaling up, but a lot of them they're either scaling up methodologies or even my own experiences working with clients. As recent, the last couple of weeks have been very chaotic, and I've spent countless hours working with various clients. So, but the first concept I want to talk about, and I'm going to reference this gentleman a few times probably over this webinar series, and that is Jim Collins. And in his book, Great by Choice, that came out, I think, in 2009, he talked about this concept of return on luck, ROL. Now, what's interesting is in Great by Choice, and I talk about this often in my daily video updates or business tips of the day during this crisis, is this return on luck. And what Jim Collins noticed is that companies that have continuous return on luck, they do so regardless whether it's good luck or bad luck. And I find that very fascinating. The companies that have continuous return on luck, sometimes it's good luck that they get a nice return on, but sometimes it's bad luck. And actually the difference was like 49, 51% of the time. So it doesn't matter if it's good luck or bad luck. Everyone can have good return on luck. We are in a bad luck situation right now for most of us in business. Not everyone. I have clients that are actually surging right now and just trying to keep up because of the industry that they're in. But even those of you who are in industries that are being hit moderately, hit hard, I do believe there's some return on luck there. Sometimes you got to be really creative to find that. So that today I'm going to talk a bit about that, some ideas, and this whole webinar series really is a way, whenever there's major commotion in the marketplace or in the economy, people are changing. And how do you position yourself in a way that you get positive return on this bad luck? And he did notice that, the ones who do are the ones who take the time to, think strategically, take that strategic thinking time to not only see what is the crisis we're dealing with right now, but what does this mean, and where is business going? Where's my industry going? Where's my business going, and how can I position myself where the marketplace is going, where industry is going? I'm a big hockey fan, and one of the greats, Wayne Gretzky's saying was, I don't go to where the puck is, I go to where the puck is going. And how can you as a business go to where your market is going? Go there to receive that pass. Now, today we're going to be talking about different cash levers, different ways that you can influence your cash position within your company. Now, it is a fact that cash is king. I like this slide. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. It's my opinion, but cash is king, because you cannot, cash in the bank is your foundation, it's your safety net. You cannot pay cash with profits. You cannot pay cash with your assets. Those are assets you own. You can't pay cash with your receivables, or sorry, you can't pay bills with your receivables. You can only pay bills. You can only pay your expenses with cash. So cash really is king. Of course, liabilities are what you owe, and your equity is your book value. Liquidity is king right now. And your cash reserves is what's going to give you flexibility. Now, when we're scaling businesses, when I'm coaching companies to scale businesses, I always look at it and say, your cash reserves is what gives you flexibility to take advantage and to jump on opportunities when you have good luck. Now we're in bad luck situation. Your cash reserves, or what you can generate even now as we're in this crisis, those cash reserves that you can generate are what's going to give you that safety net, allow you to move through and to see this all the way through and have your business not only survive. I don't want your business to just survive. I want it to thrive. So the trick is to find those cash levers, to find those tools that you can pull, and that's what we're going to share today. Because at the end of the day, I often talk about how can you operate your business, or how can you strategically restructure your business so that you're getting 3 to 10 times the cash flow of your competitors. Well, now that might mean just having enough cash to get through the next 3 months. Now, why is cash so important? Cash is the jet fuel to your company. Cash is the oxygen to your company. Without it, you can't continue. I always ask folks, who here has played Monopoly? I'm sure we all have. Now, what happens when you run out of cash? Are you out of the game? Not necessarily, but approaching my past go to get another $200 in my coffers, I sure don't want to land on that boardwalk with a hotel on it. If you don't have cash in Monopoly, you have high risk. You have a lot of risk of losing the game and being beaten out. Same in business. So cash is crucial. Just another quick way to look at it is when I think of liquidity, when you start any business, when you're in any situation in business, it starts with liquidity. You need cash in the bank. You start a business, you need money. That cash will give you opportunities for growth. Growth will give you profitability. Profitability gives you more liquidity, and it goes around and around. But it starts with that foundation of liquidity. It starts with that foundation of cash. Now, we're going to talk about cash conversion cycle in a moment. Now, when we talk about our cash conversion cycle, that's the scaling up tool. That looks at the time it takes between when you spend any kind of resources, energy, or money on gaining a sale to when you actually get paid for that eventual sale. Now, there's a best practice. There's a case study here. And again, I'm going to share a bunch of examples. Some of them may not pertain to you at all, but other ones I'm hoping that everyone here will gain a gold nugget or two. Now, one of the case studies is Dell Computer. Dell Computer at the beginning of the 90s, their cash conversion cycle was 63 days, meaning they were growing fast, but they were running out of cash. But in 63 days meant that by the time they started, with the spending resources to gain a sale to when they had money in the bank, it was 63 days. Now that's when they hired Tom Meredith as their CFO. Tom came in and completely reversed that. They changed their business model. They started getting payment up front. So when you bought a Dell computer in the 90s, they changed their system so you paid up front. Then they took that money, went and bought supplies from their vendors, built the computer, sent them out, and they actually didn't even have to pay their vendors for a number of days afterwards. So their cash conversion cycle went from 63 days down to negative 21, meaning the faster they grew, the more cash they generated. Now, we're not talking about scaling in these times of this crisis, but how can you generate more cash? There comes the scaling up tool, the cash conversion cycle. Now, the cash conversion cycle, we're going to go through some examples here today, but what I'm really going to urge you to do is this is one exercise I want you to do either yourself, take some quiet time after this webinar, or with your team and go through this, because normally this is a 2-hour workshop, this discussion alone with teams that I bring through. But for you, I'm going to introduce it. give you some examples, and I urge you to spend some time with this, because even during these times, there are things you can do. Now, the cash conversion cycle, it looks at, it gives it, the approach is that you have 3 different ways to shorten your cash conversion cycle in 4 areas of your business. And those 4 areas, and look at them each individually. Look at your sales cycle, the first cycle. How can you how can you speed up? How can you reduce mistakes? How can you make that work much faster so you shorten the cash conversion cycle with your sales? Part B there, if you're in manufacturing, what's your manufacturing or your production cycle? If you're in retail, your inventory cycle. How can you shorten your inventory cycle or your manufacturing cycle, again, to produce more cash? Delivery cycle, if you're getting this product to your customers, how can you shorten that delivery cycle? And of course, your billing and payment cycle. How can you shorten that to bring in more cash faster into your business? And right now, it's more important than ever. The 3 ways. Yeah.
Andy, just a question while you're there. Where do you see, is there one of these that people tend to misunderstand more than the other, or where do you find unmined opportunities? Any sort of themes there, or does it just vary?
It's a little bit of all of them, because quite often in different companies that I work with, they'll have their major breakthrough. Sometimes it's in the sales cycle, and I'll show you an example in a moment. Sometimes the billing cycle, but you want to look at every one of them individually. So as an example, now if you're in retail or restaurant business, I mean, we'll talk about how you can maybe reinvent yourself to do, to service people with it not coming in your restaurant. But when it comes to the payment, getting that payment up front, getting as many payments as possible up front, and thinking of the billing and payment cycle. Now is the time to be going out and being proactive. And I'm going to talk to you about how to talk, a methodology for talking to people that owe you money, as well as people you might owe money to. Because getting money in quicker from people that owe you money, that's going to help your cash conversion cycle. By delaying or working on arrangements so that you can delay payments to people you might owe money to will also help in that. So there's a lot of things, but I break it down into these 4 so that you and your team can look at each one of them and just focus on one of them at a time. And by the way, oftentimes, thanks God, oftentimes, the salespeople work on the sales cycle, but the real breakthrough idea might come from the product delivery person looking at sales. Somebody from outside that area of that business to look at that part of the business with fresh eyes. That'll have a huge, can have a huge impact. Now, when you're looking at the 4 areas of your business, these are the 3 things to look for: is how can we shorten cycle time? How can we just speed it up? How can we reduce mistakes? Mistakes cost time. Time costs cash in your bank. And of course, how can we improve your business model? And this is where this last point is one that will have the most profound impact, but it's more of a profound impact longer term. Right now in a crisis, you're going to be looking for quick wins wherever you look at these. To give you a couple of examples, and these are examples to maybe spur some ideas, but Catapult Systems, they're a IT consulting company. One thing that they did was to improve their cash position, their cash cycle, is they started billing twice a month instead of once a month. Very simple thing, but where everybody was paying, let's say, net 30 days, by billing twice a month, they actually sped up their cash by about 2 weeks for half the month. I have clients that have gone on to weekly billing with their clients. Instead of doing service, and if you're in a service delivery business, instead of doing service and doing work on the first week of the month, but you're not billing to the end of the month, which means that they're not going to pay to the end of the next month. What if you billed every week? Then your money is always should be 30 days out, not 30 to 60 days, depending on the time of the month that you're spending money delivering that service. So that's an easy, quick one. PPR travel, PPR staffing. Good friend of mine, Dwight Cooper down in Jacksonville, Florida. He started this company, and they saved millions of dollars in cash flow every month by eliminating mistakes. Simply eliminating mistakes. And there's a famous story. This is Dwight with his bookkeeper, but one thing that they did was, and this is a lesson learned for everybody. This might be something. Is Dwight basically when he started his company, he did nursing staffing. So he was staffing hospitals with nurses throughout the Eastern Seaboard, and had over 7,000 nurses being staffed in different hospitals, to give you an idea of the scope. And one thing that they would do is they would bill at the end of every month like everybody else in the industry, and then they'd wait, and they usually got paid in about net 45 days or longer. And what they started doing was and one of the things that slowed down the billing collection process was when there were mistakes in the invoice. So an invoice was received by a hospital, they'd find a mistake, they discard the entire invoice and ask to be resubmitted, in which case the clock started ticking again for another 45 days. So what they started doing is, before sending the invoice to the hospital, they would just go to the accounts payable clerk at their hospital, at their client's business, and email them a copy of the invoice and say, does everything look in order there? Is there anything that you need changed? And if there was, they would change it right there in the moment and then submit the invoice, as opposed to submitting the invoice, learning 30 days later when it came up for payment that there's a mistake, and starting the clock all over again. And because they got really good at invoicing with no mistakes, their clients understood and they knew that there were no mistakes and were easy invoices to process. So the other thing that they did, and you can't really, it's a little bit hard to see in this slide, but they started printing all their invoices on baby blue paper, so that when it was stacked up in the in that stack of payables by the accounts payable clerk, they knew that baby blue invoice was from PPR. It was going to be easy to process. It made its way to the top. And they literally saved themselves millions of dollars in cash flow every month by doing that. So the lesson here, though, which is kind of underlined, is we all have relationships with the person that we're selling to in our clients, right? In our clients' businesses. Does your accountant or does your bookkeeper, or do you have a relationship with the person who cuts the checks? That something as simple as that. So if you're collecting money, instead of calling those clients and that manager who hired your service, what if you called the accounts payable clerk and just said, listen, Sue, I know we haven't met before. My name is Andy Biting. I work with blah, blah, blah. And, we submitted our invoice. I just want to make sure that you've received it. And if there are any questions, and if there's any possible way that we get that processed a little bit quicker than normal, forge a relationship with the accounts payable clerk will, forging a relationship with the manager will get you the business. The accounts payable clerk will get you your money. So think about that. Another great example, Ron Lovett, a friend of mine, turned into a friend of mine, was a client for about 5-6 years before he sold his company a few years ago. He did security business. We did the cash conversion cycle, and it was interesting because we actually had to break up the meeting because they had to take a call because a guard did not show up to a car show in Truro, Nova Scotia. So here are the executives of this company doing about $10 million a year at the time, who flew in from around the country for this meeting, and we had to stop because a guard didn't show up in Truro. And I asked, how much is that contract worth? He said, we'll be billing $345 for this. I said, are you kidding me? After this, they actually went through and they did some analysis, and they found that 76% of their clients represented less than 5% of their business and represented 100% of their receivable problems. So when I talked to him later, we just got together for the first 2-day session, and later on that week, he said, he telling me this, he's so excited. I said, so what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to fire all of them. And if somebody's not paying you, they're not a good customer. And especially if 76% of the customers that are causing all the problems are representing less than 5% of your business, he didn't actually fire them. What he did was he raised his minimum billing amount, so that they would still do that, but they would not take on any job unless it billed out. I think it was $3,000, and in which case it had to be paid up front by a credit card. No issues. The receivable issues went to zero overnight, and then they started working on getting the cash in faster from their bigger clients. So this exercise, I really want you to take a moment. I spent a little bit more time on this specific topic because I really want you to take a moment with your team after this webinar to talk through all 4 steps. If you're in a service business, part B may not be applicable to you, but all the other ones, and look for ways to speed up the cycle, eliminate mistakes, or maybe change your business model slightly. And even in today's day and age, in this current situation, you can find ways to improve your cash conversion cycle and get cash in quicker. Because during these times of uncertainty, cash in your bank account is what's critical. That's what I care about. I'm going to move on to the second section, and that is to extend your credit and to extend your liquidity. And I'm going to briefly just touch on a couple of key things, and then a key concept or key idea I want you to take away from this. And that is, right now, during this crisis, there are 2 avenues for, there's 2 options I want to discuss. There's a lot more options for liquidity and cash, but these are 2 I want to discuss quickly. The first one is your bank. Actually, even the government, whether you're in Canada or the US, I know there's some Americans as well as Canadians on this webinar. There are programs in place where governments are backing loans, but a lot of it's done through private banks. So you want to look at that, what's available to you. But even now, if you're in good standings with the bank and you have a solid business right now, they always say, get credit when you don't need it. Make sure your credit's in place before you need it. I would also go so far and to consider getting that cash available. So, I mean, speaking from a personal experience, one of the things that started derailing one of my past businesses is during the 2008-2009 crisis, I had credit set up for a major expansion we were doing in 2007, and I had the option to receive that cash. And at the time, and it was north of $1 million at the time. And at the time I said, no, I don't need it for another 6 months. So I don't want to pay interest on it. So I'm not going to take it. Well, during that 6-month period, that's when the crash started happening in the US, and that money never did come through. And that's what started the snowball effect that ultimately took that business down. And what my lesson learned is that when you have credit available, take it. Right now, if you're, regardless of the current situation and the government interventions, if you have credit available and you're worried about cash at all, take it, because if things really go south, you do not know, you can't be certain about what the credit availability is going to be. You may have a lot of equity tied up in some real estate or some assets, some equipment, but we don't know what the next 2 months, 6 months are going to look like for certain, and how the banks are going to react. We're kind of getting into unprecedented times with record low rates, Bank of Canada and US Treasury rates. These are uncharted territories, and I think everybody's a little bit nervous, and I would be as well. If cash is going to potentially be an issue for you, get that credit, secure that credit. I even have one of my scaling up clients that has gone to their bank and has withdrawn their credit line. They have a few $1 million line of credit and have withdrawn the entire amount and put it into another bank account with another banking institution. And when they were questioned, and they weren't into their draw at all, but they wanted that money set aside just in case, and were willing to pay the interest on it. And interestingly enough, when the bank asked, why are you doing this? He said, it's just for security. And he jokingly said, at the end of the day, we don't trust you 100%. So I'd rather pay interest and have the money in another account just in case. They can always pay it off and bring it back and pay it down in 4 months, 6 months if they need to. But having that availability could mean life or death for your business.
Yeah, so important. And Andy, would that include some of the sort of one-time government programs that are being announced okay, here we go.
Yeah. And actually, with the government programs, I know a lot of people in commercial real estate business, and we also have investment holdings ourselves. Wherever we can, we're taking the banks or the government up on the offering through the banks on mortgage deferrals or principal payment deferrals. Wherever you can, you may want to do that. What I find interesting is the number of entrepreneur friends of mine that are even doing that for their house, for their home mortgage. People that shouldn't need to worry about the cash, getting that extra wiggle room, even if you don't think you need it. That's the concept I want you to leave with, is even if you are not sure if you need it or not, you may want to consider putting it in place, because if you have any kind of any kind of stress on your business in the future, and it could mean life or death for your business or for your family expenses, you may want to consider that.
Thank
Now,
you.
no problem. Now, when it comes to the government-backed programs, they are coming out both sides of the border with unprecedented levels of support. I'm not going to get into the details. I know that there are, in being in Canada, I'm more familiar with the Canadian support that they're offering. Like, they just announced the 75% wage subsidy. Figure out if you qualify and how to apply for it. Make sure you get on that if you're going to keep your employees on payroll. There's a $40,000 government-backed loan that is supposed to be made available. The mechanisms, I don't believe, have been announced. Maybe they have today, of which 10,000 is going to be forgivable. Look at those. Again, even if you don't need it, if you get that money in the bank, then it's it's either low interest or no interest for the period of time, and $10,000 forgivable. If you can qualify for it, get that. Tax deferrals, take them. Right now is a time to hoard cash for a little while as best you can, just in case, because I would hate to see something go south and the money you were counting on next month not be there, and then you really find yourself backed into a corner. One thing I do suggest is make one person on your team accountable for researching these things, these programs, because there's a lot of information out there. Researching them, finding out what you're qualified for, and applying for them. Make one person accountable for that on your team, because if it's left up to you, if you're the head of the business, you may be really busy putting out fires and dealing with the day-to-day. Make one person accountable for this, and it will, just make sure you don't miss out on any opportunities you may have. Okay. Now, the third topic I want to touch on quickly, and this is a really tough one for people in business, is the advantages and disadvantages to downsizing. You need to watch your dollars, and the last thing anybody wants to do is lay people off. Unfortunately, however, some people, some businesses have to do that in order to stay afloat, to be able to continue. There are different programs. There is the wage subsidies in Canada. There's work share programs that are actually really well set up. That may be an option where somebody can work 50%. Work 50% capacity, 50% payment, and then the difference is made up kind of like employment insurance program is, so they can essentially collect 70-80% of what they normally would by working 50% of the time. Know the numbers for your business and for your employees, but there are different concepts there. So it's not, the point I'm trying to make is, it's not either keeping everybody on or laying everybody off. There's a lot of gray area in between. Look at the options and know the impact, because through all of this, we want to watch our dollars. We want to watch our spending, but I always tell people, don't shoot yourself in the foot. This too will pass at some point. We don't know when, we don't know how, but it will pass, and you want to be positioned and ready to be able to, head out of the gate running. So don't lose your best people during this process. if you can at all, avoid it. But the last thing I want to see is a sign like this up on your door permanently. So sometimes you do need to make those decisions. And my only advice there is know the options, do it as a last resort. But if you are going to do it, cut deep and cut hard and swiftly. Don't prolong it. If you have to lay people off, if you are a restaurant business or a retail business, obviously you would have already done this. Retail business is not open right now, you would have already done this. But most other businesses are somewhere in the middle. If you do need to cut quickly and cut early, is my one piece of advice. And if you are going to, so this is a way of presenting tough news that I've shared with a lot of my contacts, a lot of my clients, because I have had clients go through layoffs. And here's a format that I want to share with you, and this will be in the follow-up notes as well. But if you have to deliver bad news to clients, here's a 3-step process and format for the conversation that will really help you. The first step is you start by just stating the situation. This is the situation, here's the economic realities to the company, and as a result, here's the decision that's been made. It's not up for negotiation. Here's the decision that's been made. Pull off the Band-Aid really quickly. Secondly, you got to remember that your audience is going to be in a bit of a state of shock. They're going to be in freeze mode, fight, flight, or freeze when they hear bad news or are threatened. Most of them will be in freeze mode. And they may not think of the questions that they might have right away. So here's a format is state the situation, step 1. Step 2, say, you know what? I'm sure all of you have questions or are going to have questions. Now, what I've done is putting myself into your shoes. I've made a list of 8 questions that I would ask me in your situation. These are the 8 questions that I would ask based on your situation. And then go through and ask and answer each one. And by the way, folks, the number 1 question, the very first one is, okay, this is the situation. We're laying off 50% of our employees. And the first question is always, what does that mean for me? And answer it. What does that mean? And think of them in their situation. What does that mean for, how am I going to cover my mortgage bill? How am I going to cover my car payment? What does it mean? How do I apply for unemployment insurance? So have those questions and ask and answer every single one of them. And at the end, you will have asked and answered most of the questions they may have. And then the third step is, once you've made the announcement, asked and answered the questions, third step is leave the door open for future questions. Saying, listen, I've asked and answered 8 questions that I thought you would have. But there's no doubt some of you will have other questions as you go home and you digest this information. My door is open, and here's how you can get a hold of me. And open that door for future questions. So if you need to deliver bad news, that's a great format to do that. 3-step process. Use it. It'll help the news go, the communication go much, much better. The next part I want to discuss quickly is business relationships. Now, this could be relationships with vendors that you owe money to, or like we talked about, sometimes people owe you money. How do you approach those difficult conversations, and how do you make it a win-win? Well, Chris Voss wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, and it's the best book I ever read on negotiations. Chris Voss was the former head hostage negotiator for the FBI. Met him last fall, incredibly intelligent guy and unbelievable negotiator. And he has a 3-step process. Why is it always 3 steps? A 3-step process for having difficult conversations with a relationship that you need to keep intact. And here they are. The first one is, I'll run through them quickly: tactical empathy, dynamic silence, and then thought-shaping question. So tactical empathy, you got to meet people where they're at. Business is hard for you right now. It's hard for your vendors right now too. It's hard for your customers right now too. Don't discount them. They're in the same boat, maybe even a lot worse than you are. So make sure you empathize with them. Secondly, once you empathize with them, use dynamic silence. Just don't say anything. Silence in a conversation is an incredibly powerful tool. So let it sit there. And then start with a thought-shaping question that starts with the word how. I'll give you an example. Say you have a restaurant business and I had to close my doors and I cannot pay my food vendor that has been supplying me for the last 7 years I've been in business. So a conversation might go like this, is that, John, this is a tough situation. Obviously we've closed our doors. We have no revenues coming in. I can't pay you for the supplies that we received 3 weeks ago. I can't pay you right now. And I know this has got to be hard for you. And use what Chris Voss would say, your late night radio DJ voice. I know that this is hard for you as well. Like, I can only imagine. We're not in this alone. Every restaurant that you deal with is probably having a hard time paying you, and it's got to be hard. And then let it sit. Use that dynamic silence. And then break the silence. Well, John, listen, how can we work together so that we come out of this work with a good, solid working relationship for many years to come? How can we make this happen? So you've stated that you can't pay them. You let that sink in, and you ask a thought-shaping question centered on the future, and put it in their ball court and let them come up with a solution to their problem as well as yours. This can also go for people that owe you money, talking about how hard it is. And I know, it's really tough for you as well. This is hitting your business, your work, whatever it might be. Let that sit, and then say, how can we work together? Because I need the cash flow in our business to keep going and to be able to keep serving you. So how can we work together so we come out of this stronger, with a good, strong, solid working relationship where we can continue to do business for many years to come? How can we do that, John? And let them start to come up with solutions for their problem. Really, really helps. And I love that shaping of the conversation to being very proactive and very, looking forward to the future and very collaborative. The last point I'm going to touch on today in the webinar, I've got a bonus one too that I'll show you in a moment, but the last one as part of the scheduled discussion topics is know your cash position, hopefully daily, if not at least weekly. There's a saying, you hope for the best, but plan for the worst. You want to know where you sit. Know the real situation. If you have a bookkeeper or an accountant working for you or with you, don't let them sugarcoat anything. Just tell it to you like it is. One of the strategies that I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of, I do this in a lot of areas, looking back at past results, but also looking forward, is do a rolling, in this case, I would suggest a 12-week forecast, because things are changing so rapidly. It's so quickly these days that projecting anything out more than 12 weeks or 13 weeks or 1 quarter, you're really, even that is stretching it for what you can project out. But put together a spreadsheet, could look something like this, that has your beginning cash balance in a weekly forecast of all the incoming cash that's going to come from sales or receivables, all your outgoing cash for payables, payroll, things like that, and have that spreadsheet updated. If it's daily, ideally, that would be wonderful, but at least weekly, and do a rolling 12-week forecast on your cash position, not your sales position, your cash position, because the cash is your lifeblood. That's what's going to keep you going. That's your oxygen for the business. Now, a quick little bonus. I'm going to run through this very quickly, and this is going to be part of my offering. I'm going to run through a tool through the Scaling Up community, and it's Stress Test My Business. I'll show you how it works here in a sec, but the Stress Test My Business will run through a bit of an analysis. We just need 6 numbers, and we can show you, where the stresses are. And as we dive into it further, I'm going to give you a very quick overview, and also leading into the power of one. And the power of one is, what are the small changes I can do to my business that will have the biggest effect on cash? The way I look at it is, 1 plus 1 plus 1 can equal a 19% increase in your business, in the cash reserves in your business. And that's the power of that tool. So I am going to just switch over, and so I'll just show you an example. So the offering that I am putting out there for folks that where this could help is in their follow-up email, I'll have a Calendly link or a scheduling link. You can book a half-hour call, and we can run through this together with your numbers confidentially, obviously. I just need 6 numbers from you, and we can look at what the effects might be on your cash position by tweaking things up or down. Here's a quick example. Let's say you have a business that does $1 million a year in revenue. Your gross margins are $550,000, 55%. Your net profit is $80,000 a year for the last year. Your receivables are currently sitting at $30,000. You have $300,000 in inventory, and your payables are $50,000. Well, by doing this, it can analyze those numbers, and as it pops up here, we can then come into what we call the power of one exercise. And we can look at different levers that you can pull. So you can look at and say, okay, right now, operating profit over the next 12 months, if all things continue being equal, is $80,000 before and after. But we can pull different levers. One might be increasing prices. One might be increasing volumes. Now, again, during this crisis, not all of these are going to be possible, but it'd be interesting to see which lever based on your numbers will have the biggest impact. One could be a reduction of your cost of goods. So maybe not increasing prices, but you're expanding margins by reducing your costs. One is reducing your overhead, reduction of receivable days, so collecting money a little bit quicker, reduction of inventory days, and increasing payables, so extending your payables. And by doing this with all your numbers in there, we can look at, okay, if we reduce our overhead by 1%, it means that it will increase our profitability by $4,700 and also increase our cash position by $4,700. Well, what if we extend out payables by 1%? Well, extending out payables doesn't change anything with our profitability, but it will put another $1,200 in the bank account. Interesting. And we can look at that and see what all of them will do. A reduction in receivable days. So if we collect a little bit faster, again, no difference in profitability, but it puts another $2,700 in the bank. That's interesting. And we can run through this and see what the variables are, which lever or lever, if you're US or Canadian, will have the biggest impact on your cash position as well as your profitability. So that is going to be a free offering for anybody who wants to. We'll schedule that out and over the next coming days or weeks, and we'll run through this together. So we're 11 minutes to the top of the hour. It's a lot of content.
How are you doing, Andy? That was jam-packed with value. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope people can get some nuggets and can use some of that, and really, it's right now it's about survival. Yeah.
2 great books you mentioned. One is Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference. Also a huge fan.
You were there. We saw him together, remember?
I met him as well. Chris has the concept of forget yes, go for no. And that's worth reading the book for as well. And then this is the Scaling Up book, which is this resource as well. So just a couple questions, Andy. So, even given those tools, what's a common sort of hang up or misunderstanding or something? Like what, do you find there's any themes in like where people might hesitate or how, how they would choose to react, sort of even given all this information, or any thoughts or tips there?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and I see it a lot with clients, with entrepreneurs, sometimes pride gets in the way, right? And you know what? Right now, there's a lot of people hurting. You're not the only one. You are not the only one. Believe me, most people are hurting. If they're not hurting, they're worried or they're concerned. So when you call up, communication number one with your employees. That's just a general rule of thumb in business, period. But it is also especially true with your vendors, the people you owe money to. Don't email them. Pick up the phone and call them and just say, John, I know I owe you money and I want to talk through it. They will respect you for it because 98% of the time, John's also in a difficult situation. People that owe money to you, again, calling them up. Pick up the phone. Don't email them. Call them up and just say, listen, we're in a really tight bind. I'm trying to collect on monies that are owing. I know your business is suffering too. And have that conversation with the Chris Voss approach. So get over the pride and make the phone call, because I was just going to say too, with your bank as well. If you are going to miss a payment, a loan payment, or you need that temporary overdraft or whatever, call them up. Communication will get you so much further ahead. And oftentimes people, the pride gets in the way and they don't want to admit they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. But the thing is that a lot of people are. And even if you're not, still be proactive with your cash management and have those conversations.
Okay, well, I know our last few minutes will evaporate here quickly. Any final thoughts from you, Andy?
Nothing. Not too much. But for me, the main thing is be proactive with this. If you, a lot of people are scared. And be proactive. If you don't want to lay people off, look at all other avenues. If you don't want to lay your employees off, look at all other avenues, and don't wait for disaster to strike. Be proactive. If you can get that money in the bank, I know people, like I said, that are putting money, cash reserves in bank accounts. Another quick point, I learned this one the hard way, is wherever you have your business loans with, make sure if you are taking cash reserves, keep them in another bank account, even if you have to open it up temporarily with another bank. Because I have had my bank, who shall remain nameless, go in and swipe. I remember the day before payroll, they swiped the account and brought it down to $1 balance. And it was tens of thousands of dollars in there. And I've had that happen before. So if you're nervous, just take those precautions. And because my worry is that sometimes, banks get nervous as well. And I've seen it and I've experienced it. And it's not fun either. So be proactive, and communicate.
That advice is worth the hour right there. Tremendous. So,
yeah.
Well, why don't we start to wrap up? I think we're both committed to to using the hour we asked for, nothing more. So, each of you that have attended, thank you. I know your time is valuable. It's very busy times. We really appreciate it, and our goal is to provide you unreasonable value through all this. You will receive a follow-up email with all of the tools that were referenced, some other notes from us, a full transcript of the session, a link to a site where you can see the recording of this session, and most valuable of all is an opportunity if you wanted to get on the phone with Andy and talk through any of those tools. There'll be a Calendly link there. So if any of those are valuable for you, please take advantage of them. This is the first of our series. Next week, we're going to be touching the topic of cash again from a different angle. We'll have Natasha Shiven here, who's a world-class procurement and cost optimization specialist. So she'll show us some of the techniques she's used in some of the largest companies around the world, and you'll find they'll dovetail very nicely with the tools that Andy's showing us here. A couple more things from us. You will receive a feedback survey, very valuable for us to hear from you on how we did, what you liked and what you didn't like in the lead up in the session itself and in the follow-up. So please, if you could take a minute, give us that feedback. And also please spread the word. We'd like to reach as many people as possible here. if this is at all helpful, we'd like anyone to have it. We started with a 100 attendee cap. Andy and I have committed to remove that cap if it helps more people benefit. So we'll move our tooling up to another level. So feel free to share the series link. Feel free to share the output of this session. We'll have the opportunity for new people to come in and avail themselves of the recordings and tools as well. So you'll get all the tools and things retroactively if you visited the session page after this. So I think that's it. Andy, anything else we should remind folks of?
I think we covered it. Yeah, every Tuesday morning, it's going to happen at the same time with different leading experts. So I'm happy that so many people came out for this first one, and I look forward to our future sessions as well, because there's going to be some interesting topics. I know I'm going to learn a ton.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you to you, Andy. Great value, and thank you to everyone on the webinar. Have a great day, and we'll be here at the same time next Tuesday.
All right. Have a good week, Scott, and have a good week, everyone.